Let's try a couple where we need to factor out a negative coefficient. Here we have 6m squared minus 5mn minus 6m plus 5n. All right, we'll use the grouping method. We see four terms, automatically think to try grouping. So there's our first group, there's our second group. All right, so I'm looking at this first one. I see 6 and 5, nothing really there for a GCF. But when I'm looking at m squared and mn, I see I can factor out an m. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the first one. We have m. That leaves us with 6m minus 5n. Okay, well look what we have here. We have minus 6m plus 5n. But remember, these have to be the same, right? Whatever's left, this 6m minus 5n has to match whatever's left over here. So, but they don't, they're off by a negative. So let's look at it this way. Let's do a GCF here of negative 1. Negative 1. Okay, when we factor a negative 1 out of there, minus 1 times, when you factor out a negative 1, it changes the sign of everything left behind. So this negative 6m becomes positive 6m. This 5n becomes negative 5n, minus 5n, and now look what happened. These match again, which is what we need to have happen to move forward with grouping. So if you're ever doing this grouping method and you're off, but just by a negative, they're so close, but they're just the negatives of each other, try factoring out a negative in your second term there, and that should fix it right up. Okay. These two combine and come out to the front as a single GCF that gets factored out. Oof. Okay, so out it comes, 6m minus 5n. What's left behind? We have this m and a minus 1. So m minus 1 is left behind. There's our factored form. Let's try another one. So here we have 5xy minus 15x minus 6y plus 18. All right, let's go in with the grouping here. First two, last two. Let's look at the first two here. What's our GCF? Well, we have 5xy, 15x, so they both have an x in there. Remember, we're looking for the largest factor that evenly divides both terms. So we have a 5 and a 15. Well, 15 is 5 times 3, so I think our GCF is 5 times x. So let's put a 5x in here. 5x. All right. So let's write this up so far. All right, we factored out a GCF of 5x here. That left us with y minus 3. This tells us what we're shooting for in our second group. So I'm looking at the second one here, and I'm trying to figure out what the GCF is. GCF. Okay, well, I can see I can factor out a 6. If I just factored out a 6, though, we'd be left with negative y plus 3. But we want positive y minus 3. So instead of factoring out a 6, which is the obvious GCF, I'm going to factor out the slightly less obvious GCF, but just as good, of negative 6. Because these remaining terms have to line up in both groups. Okay, so let's see what happens here. You factor a negative 6 out. When you factor out a negative, it changes the sign of everything remaining. So negative 6, when we factor out a negative 6, it leaves us with just positive y. And we factor a negative 6 out of 18. That's 18 divided by negative 6. We get negative 3. And just what we wanted to have happen. Look, our terms match up. Our remaining terms match. So let's factor these out. This time I want to factor them out to the right. You can go to the left or to the right, whatever mood you're in. Here we go. So we factored the y minus 3 out to the right. We are left with 5x minus 6. 5x minus 6, and here is our factored form by grouping.